Okay,
Beat
so
that.
yeah, all right. So you've got a big background. You've been through a regular government employee. You've been a commercial employee. You've been through IPOs. You've been through acquisitions. You have been through founding companies. You have been through companies that have done really well. Some that have just done okay. And we've only got 45 minutes to try to get through all of that. So let's talk about where you are now, and then we'll talk about what all led up to that. So what are you doing now?
Okay, I feel like in a way this is like a courtroom where I'm not sure if I should speak to the judge or should I speak to the jury out here. What do you think? How y'all do this?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a good jury. All right, so yeah, where I am right now is a company called Firia. You mentioned Firia Labs, so we actually have it's bifurcated, man. It's Firia is the parent company that's a consultancy, and we do Internet of Things type projects, engineering projects, both software and hardware design. So we're it's a small company. We've got 6 people, and we're doing fantastic things. Right now, it's 100% commercial stuff. We're not doing any government contracts, but we're not opposed to it. But really, we started the company a couple of years ago with a passion for building products for education, for the education market, K through 12. And specifically, we saw there was a need for better products to teach coding. And think about, like, I was at the Hudson Alpha Hackathon, this last hackathon. You had kids coming in from middle schools, high school level, and then some college level kids, but a lot of them weren't well prepared. They worked with stuff like Scratch, drag and drop stuff and everything, which is awesome to get as an introduction to programming. But when we were there, we actually volunteered. Some of our engineers and software engineers came in, and it was just like, man, if we're successful with our product to teach coding, this is going to go a lot better. I'd really love to make even kits to prepare. If you're going to go do a hackathon, here's some pieces like to do the UI and to do the back end and all that stuff. So, and you can, sort of teach those real skills. So, as we went out and did a lot of interviews, and we can get into this a little bit deeper later, but we did the whole process of customer discovery and interviewing lots of teachers, because we're not from, I came through technology world, not from the education world. We found out a little bit of why is it that way, and so maybe we can get into that later. I don't want to go too far, but it's really interesting. The answers are interesting. It was kind of clear why, when we looked out on the market, we didn't see anyone doing this the way software engineers would probably do it. If you're a software engineer, you're going to use a debugger to learn a little bit about the language and stuff, and that's not what teachers are doing. And there's a reason why, but we're trying to solve the problem.
Okay, cool. So the solution to that, what you guys are doing, so you've got 2 branches. You are consulting, and then you also have this product. So tell us about the product.
Okay. Well, first, if I had heard people have told me this through the years, as a person who was in startup companies and things like that for the past, 30 years. So started in 1988 when I graduated college. So I've been here for a while in Huntsville. But I've had a number of times other engineers that were going off to start something say, here's the plan. We're going to do a consultancy, right? And then with the extra money, we're going to work on a product. Like, that's never going to work. It's not going to work. You can't. I totally advise against that, because I've seen it happen where the consulting hours, the hourly billing, always sucks away all of your time, and you cannot really dedicate enough to the product to make this happen. Your product is going to wither. You can't start 2 masters. All these things. All these reasons why not to do this. So that's why I'm doing it, because I never follow my own advice, on the serious note, one of the things we did to sort of kick this off was, and listen closely, kids, we wrote an SBIR grant proposal. So there are grant solicitations out there from every government agency, and if you're doing something that lines up with something that is of concern, in our case, STEM, learning coding and things like that, we knew there were a lot of funds available. The only question is, could we get some of that funding? And so we had a few different choices. We ended up using the National Science Foundation and doing. We looked at the solicitations, and it's kind of like it doesn't really cost you anything to go for a grant like that. But and so you end up with $225,000 to help seed fund your idea. And it's a no equity investment. So
now that's an SBIR. Yeah.
That's an SBIR.
And so what are the qualifications to get that? Like, what do you have to be working on in order to get that?
Well, it could be any number of things, right? I mean, NASA does SBIRs. DoD does SBIRs, Department of Energy, all of them, right? So we did the National Science Foundation one. But it needs the qualifications, I guess, what they're looking for, all of them. SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research. So it needs to be a small business. So you have to be, which they qualify small as, guess how, what's a small business according to this? Anybody got any, is it like 50 people? Raise your hand if you think it's 50 or less. That's small, 50 or less, okay? Well, who thinks it's maybe like, no, 100? They let 100 people qualify, 100 person business, okay. What about 500 people? Okay, so Mr. Reeves here knows. It's 500 people, so a 500 person company is a small business. So there's a lot of companies around Research Park that are doing SBIRs. So I naively start writing, and I'm a decent writer, and I start researching a little bit and realizing all this stuff, that there's companies in town that have teams full of people who do nothing but grants, write these grants. So I don't want to discourage you. I want to encourage you that you can do it. You can win one the first time. If your idea is sound and it is innovative, and they want it to be innovative, they want it to be, so that's strong, and I isn't the word, but they also want it to be commercially viable. So you have to make a case that this is a commercially viable thing. They'd like for it to also have benefit to the nation, societal benefit, they call it. So all those things are attributes that you can, play up, and it winds up being, it's like doing a, something like a 20-page term paper in college, right? It's very similar to that. It's like you're writing for a long time, you're researching, you're citing your references, and then you ship it off to whichever agency and you see what happens, which was an odd experience in itself, actually. I'm used to, when I work on something, I see the results of it right away, and it's usually not a crapshoot. That's not how I usually play. And this one, it felt that way. When I turned in the grant submission, I was like, wow, that was a lot of work. Wonder what's going to happen. Odds are they're just going to reject it. And so you don't hear anything for months, like 4 months on average, before you get any feedback. And so they have panels of professors on sabbatical or whatever that review these things. So anyway, it's an odd experience. But anyway, we don't mean to go down that trail too long, but I encourage everybody to look into it if there's something that you're interested in doing. There's also, if you know people at a university, you can do what's called an STTR, small, I don't know what the first T is, but it's technology transfer. Anyway, it's for a small business coupled with a university. So you can find somebody at UAH that wants to do a project with you, and you can use some grad students, which is nice, and you also get the funding for doing that. So you just use some of your funding back towards the university. So there's a lot of opportunities for doing stuff like that. So back to the story how it started, right? So when we started Firia, I knew that the biggest thing there's two things. I had a passion for doing this educational product. I knew I wanted to do this. I knew that it's something I'd wanted to do for a long time and seen the need for a long time. But in order for a company, in order to sell investors, if you wanted to get angel investors or VCs or what have you, you need an opportunity that's a substantial size. You need to be able to say, well, this is at least $100 million a year industry to start, or maybe it's $200 million a year, or it could be to the moon, whatever. This one I looked at, I'm like, I can't say that this is more than $10 or $20 million a year. That I believe you could make if you hit this one pretty well, looking at the total addressable market and all these things that you do. And so no company that I'm working, I'm not going to go pitch investors on this. This is something we've got to self-fund. And if it works, great. We can have a 10-person company with a $20 million a year market, and we've done something really great.
Hey, really quick, explain what market you're talking about.
And in this case, it's the education market. So we mentioned K through 12. So it's like, okay, there's a market for, if you look at the census in the US alone, there's about 4 million students in each grade. So we're looking maybe starting around grade 5 through 12. So there's a reasonable size market in terms of the number of students you could potentially reach. But then of course, when you're doing, we could look at, one of the things I'd also advise you, if you guys are all here because you have an entrepreneurial spirit, there's lots of great books that tell you kind of how to do market segmentation, and I'll recommend one to you. It's called Disciplined Entrepreneurship. It's by a professor at MIT. MIT teaches an entrepreneurship course, and he taught the course for years as one of the professors that teaches it. But it distills a lot of the knowledge from a lot of the startup books. And we're really lucky in the past 10 years about how much information has been disseminated, to keep you from making a lot of the mistakes that I've personally made and seen others make, and through different startups. So get a book like that, The Lean Startup, and others are also really good. But this one, Disciplined Entrepreneurship, say that fast 3 times, actually does a really good job of distilling it down. So if you take a look at, how do you segment the market? How do you identify what is a market, a bunch of people to talk to each other and share a common problem or whatever. Lots of ways to define it. But if you go through this process of making sure that you're really onto something, and that's kind of what we did, and that's the market of students who might be interested, or teachers in schools and districts might be interested in our product.
And your product is helping them code, learn to code.
Right. It's stuff, we wound up, they wanted something physical. That's another interesting thing, right? So we looked at software to do this, but there's, happily for us, because I came from, building electronic stuff, embedded electronics, and so it turns out that that's a big thing in schools now, or with education. There's the thing they call physical computing, and I don't mean this to be a sales pitch for Firia Labs, but it's general knowledge, right? It's weird because kids, they grew up with screens, right? And they're desensitized by a lot of it. It's just like, of course, there are screens, And when I was a kid learning to program, I had a TRS-80. Before TRS-80s came out, I had a Sinclair, and before that, there was a computer at the college where my parents worked, and it was all command line stuff, and you made like tic-tac-toe and little adventure games with all text, But you could write, so you could conceivably write stuff yourself as a beginner programmer that was awesome, And so I remember when my kids came along, back in the 90s, right? And they were young, and they had Nintendo 64, and then it was Xbox, and there's all this stuff. Like, man, there's nothing I could show them that would impress them on coding. Like, as a beginner coder, it's really hard. I think they're making some good inroads with like Minecraft programming. If you're controlling Minecraft, that's a good way to go. And there's some virtual robot things that are pretty good on the screen. But still, it's on the screen, and so kids just a lot of times don't get into it that much. But if you give them a physical thing and they can make it do something, whether it's a robot or a little board with LEDs or whatever, like, oh man, yeah, I controlled that thing. And then their imagination gets going. Like, I could hook this up to some lights around my skateboard, man, or I could, I could put this on my dance outfit, or I could, stuff like that. So we're finding that was kind of a hypothesis. Going into it, I didn't buy that really was a thing. I was like, I know I want it to be true. But that almost calls it into more question, right? So it's another great thing to think about as an entrepreneur. I think Richard Feynman said it best, but I can't remember what he said. No, he said, foremost, or whatever, you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest one to fool. So it's something like that. And so when I got this great idea, this is gonna be awesome, and I can see this is gonna be the case in the future, and you may be right about this is where the future's going, but okay, you've really got a question. Is it going to go the way you think it's going to go? Are you heavily biased, right? Confirmation bias. So yeah, we tested that. We went out in the classrooms and watched and saw the response of kids, and it's really a real thing, So if you're into makers and maker products like Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, that's a thing that really gets more kids, even like girls. It's one of the things as a CTO of Synapse, and in sort of executive technology positions in the past, we go to conferences, and Cisco's CTO, I remember this about 4 years ago, was at a conference in Chicago, and I forget her name, but a lady was up there like admonishing everyone. She says, look to your right and look to your left. And we were mostly men, and she goes, okay, there needs to be more women in those seats, And so she was telling us, get more women into technology. And I'm like, I don't know how. I don't know. They're not majoring in, electrical engineering and computer science. So what do you do about that? It's odd. We weren't setting out to solve that problem or address that problem, but as we started looking in middle school, when girls start like maturing faster than guys, start like getting interested in stuff that's real, and if you are still giving them like Legos, let's say, I love Legos, right? Lego robots and stuff. Girls are like, yeah, it's a toy. I'm an adult now. I'm like, I don't do toys anymore. So you wind up with like uber geeky guys like me who are willing to still play with Legos all the way through 12th grade, right? So why aren't there girls majoring in technology? Some of them we're just turning them off. We're not relating it to something that's real in their world. So we're in the Firia Labs products, we give them little circuit boards. We chose the microbit, but it doesn't look like a toy. It doesn't have a shiny plastic case. It's got chips on it that you can see and touch with your hand. And go, yeah, that's the chip that's in your phone that tells it if it's in portrait or landscaping mode. That's an accelerometer, and we're going to write some code to read that and do some cool stuff with it. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's real, man. So that's kind of where we're aiming with it.
Cool. All right, so let's go back to how you got to the point that you're doing that now. So you went to Auburn for college.
Yes.
Electrical engineering. Graduated in '88.
That's right.
All right, so right out of college, you went to McDonnell Douglas, which is a government contractor.
Yes.
You were there for 4-ish years. Why'd you leave?
Had a good time at McDonnell Douglas for sure, and like it's very similar, I'm sure, to a lot of the defense contractors and NASA contractors around. I didn't leave for any reasons that would say, well, don't ever work in one of those places. But you're part of a big system, and you're working on big systems in companies like that. And so what that brings with it is a different pace of work than in the commercial world, and a lot of checks and balances. And it was, for me, hard to, I wanted to talk to the customer. I wanted to see somebody, the reason I like to develop a product is I want to see the delight on someone's face when they use it, And that's, I'm thinking about that while I'm writing some code or while I'm building something. Man, I can't wait to see them use it. They're going to love this thing. So I want to feel the love back when they use it, And so I think that's the core. When I think about it in hindsight, right? It's I was feeling some of the stuff we were building was really great, but I wasn't getting that. I craved getting, working on things that I could actually ship out to customers, and also knowing that they decided to buy this thing because it's awesome, because I made it awesome, and so there are so many layers in government contracting that you're not sure, why are they buying this, or who decided they wanted to get this thing, and if I did a kick-ass job or if I did a terrible job, is it going to move the needle on that, So that's also the thing. I think if you're if you have a true entrepreneurial spirit, you're probably the type of person that likes to live kind of on the razor's edge, if I mess up, it's all going down, and so to me that keeps me motivated. If I feel you know what, I could just not show up and it'd be just fine, then I need to leave. I need to go somewhere else, right? Because that to me just means I'm not working yet. I'm not getting pushed. Another kind of a related thing is if you're a musician. I remember once I played the trumpet, right? And even the first couple of years in college, I guess really the first year, I had a scholarship to play trumpet and played I ended up getting to play in a band that I never should have been in. It was an all-college band. And so I was the worst player, in there. And I was lucky to have gotten in. But the guys that were sitting next to me were amazing. And we had an amazing director. And within 2 or 3 days, it was a week that we rehearsed together and then did a concert. Within 2 or 3 days, I realized I've never played this well. I've learned so much. I've become so much better. I'm still worse than these other people, but I'm so much better than I was. So another way to look at that is, if you're doing something, look to your right, look to your left. And if you're not maybe the worst person there, then maybe there's somewhere you should be that you could learn a lot more and be challenged more. So I think that's part of it too, right? Wanting to be in a situation where you're being challenged every day to really produce your best.
Yeah, so I think that was interesting. I don't know who all was there whenever we interviewed Andy Smith, and we asked him, why did you leave government contracting to go? Andy Smith did the Daily Burn, which is a very successful company here, and he said almost the exact same answer of, I didn't feel like I was actually impacting lives, and I couldn't see those lives as a defense contractor, versus when I got into the Daily Burn, he could literally see there's this many thousand people, he sees pictures of them being not in shape, and now they're in shape off on their app, so he could actually see he was making a difference in people's lives, and that's something that was missing from him. And then also the same answers, he liked and he wanted to feel that pressure of, if I'm not here, things get screwed up. If I'm here, you made a difference pretty much at the company, and you were impactful, I guess.
Yeah. I guess one little anecdote, which is, I hate to say, I don't want to say things negative about government contracting because it's a great thing. It definitely is what this town is built on, right? But when I left and went to Adtran was small, pre-IPO, and I needed to purchase something. I forget what it was, an oscilloscope or something like that. And I knew from, I had this McDonnell Douglas idea in my head. This is going to take months to get done, to get it purchased. And so I'm going to have to fill out a bunch of paperwork, and I'm going to have to wait, and then I'll have to call the little receiving depot every week because they won't call me when it comes in, so it's going to be bad. So I was just expecting that, right? So I went up and I was like, well, how do I...
You're at Adtran. So you've
left.
left.
I left. It's my first week in Adtran,
Okay,
right? And,
yeah.
and so I asked, hey, where can I go? What's the process for purchasing something? And they said, well, just go up to the 4th floor. It's so-and-so. Go see her. And I'm like, okay. So I walked up there and I said, yeah, I need to purchase this. And she's like, okay, well, hang on, we'll just order it right now. And order got placed, and she's like, it'll be here in 2 days. So that's the difference. It would have taken me 3 months to get that in. So it was a huge difference in the pace of things happening. It's just, you know, and that's not because they mean to do that in the government.
Right.
So there needs to be lots of checks and balances and stuff. And,
Okay, so while you're at AdTrend, there's two interesting things I heard you talk about the other day. So they IPO'd, and then you told me about an interesting car radio commercial that you heard while you were on your way into work. So tell us about both of those. So what was it like going through an IPO? What all happened with that? And then tell us about that car radio commercial.
Okay. Well, so first I'll preface it and say, you know, I was like the 200th person at AdTrend, so I was nowhere near a founder of AdTrend. But I was
Any
lucky
idea
enough.
what they're at right now?
I don't know. Jonathan, how big is AdTrend now? Do you know?
600 million revenue, about, well, it depends on factory workers, there's 1,500 to 600.
Yeah, 1,500.
So still pretty early.
Yeah, I mean, they're a small to medium-sized business. They're not a small business anymore, though. They're more bigger than 500. But I can tell you a story. You know, they act bigger than they are, I think, in some ways. You know, as an insider at AdTrend these days, and that these days meaning I was there from 2005 to 2007. It's another part of the story. And it's like, wow, I've now been in a 65,000 person company that was more agile than this. So it's really disappointing, but not to disparage AdTrend, because it's a neat place too. But where were we?
So you went through
Oh,
an
yeah.
IPO while you were
Yeah,
there.
right.
Tell us, what was that like, going through an IPO?
No, better than the IPO was day one at AdTrend. Let me tell you about day
Explain
one.
what an IPO is.
Initial public offering.
Yeah.
So as a, you know, when you're in a startup or a small company, you might think about an exit. You know, how can you get money back out of this, or how do the investors get their money back out of it? You might not, but you're gonna have a hard time getting investors on board if they can't get some sort of payback at some point, dividends or something. Right, so an IPO is one of the, it's one big fancy way of doing that, right? You're actually putting your ticker on the public stock market.
Yeah,
So
you're on the stock market.
Yeah.
People can buy part of your company.
so it's a big deal, and you generally have to get to a pretty decent sized company and revenue level before you get to that point. Yeah, at AdTrend, the first day was better. First day was they just moved into their new building, so it's on the campus where AdTrend is now. So I didn't get to live in the other buildings they were in. So they were just moving in when I started there, and this was in '92. And so I was like, my office was amazing. It was like looking out over a lake. It was huge. It was, I saw like Canadian geese flying in, landing in the lake. Like I just landed in heaven. This is really neat. This was before the awesome purchasing experience that I had, you know. Then about, I don't know, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, voice came on the intercom. There's we've hit $1 million in revenue, $1 million a month or something like that. So everyone meet downstairs in the break room. Mark's going to give a talk. So Mark Smith, the founder of AdTrend, and Lonnie McMillan was standing by, and was co-founders. They had bottles of champagne opening up. We're like hors d'oeuvres and stuff, you know, in the break room down there. This is my first day, thinking, so this is how it is, you know.
Yeah.
Why didn't I leave everyone contracting earlier?
Yeah.
So it's all downhill from there. No, it was awesome. You know, we a lot of activity, AdTrend was doing a lot of business, and you know, the IPO from an employee standpoint, you know, we had stock options, so your stock options get converted to stock, and so there's a payout that is associated with that, so that's really nice. So it's good to have a windfall like that, even if you're starting with a company that's got 200 people. You know, hopefully you'll have a situation like that where you get a piece of the company, right? And so actually my parents did better than I did though, because they were retired and they're like, you know, that looks pretty good, and so they bought, you know, stock early on and wound up making more than I made off of AdTrend. So, they asked. They said, should we invest in it? I'm like, please, no. It's enough that I'm there. You know, like I'm risking something just by being there. You don't need to do that. Well, they did it anyway. A few years ago, they said, hey, there's this Bitcoin thing. Should I invest in that? And they've got, you know, money to invest. I'm like, you know, because I didn't invest in AdTrend, so I need more. So I said, no, man, I don't understand it. Don't even touch it. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So now they're mad at me.
Oh, so they listened to you on that?
They listened to me on that one, yeah. Dang it.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us about that car radio commercial.
Okay, so yeah, I told you a story. You know, one day, and there have been a couple of opportunities. One where Bob Locklear, we were just talking about Bob. You know, Bob had left in '97 maybe to go to Austin to work for a company called NetSpeed at the time that wound up getting bought by Cisco. So I'd seen people, it was the .com boom, right? I'd seen people already leave, and they tried to lure me out there, you know, and I actually went out there and visited, and they made me an offer, and I decided I'm going to stick around, you know, for a little while longer at AdTrend. Had some good reasons, but, you know, still. a year later, NetSuite was bought by Cisco. Those guys all had millions, So I'm like, well, I guess maybe that was not such a great idea to pass up on that one, but whatever. Then I was driving into work, and you park in the parking lot. Sometimes I'd park next to Mark Smith's Ferrari, driving up in my Toyota, going, oh well, must be nice. Sometimes he drove the Aston Martin, Anyway, I didn't, I'm not like a materialistic person anyway, so not a big deal, but just things get in your head. I was on the radio, it was like an interview with some pundit, investing pundit or whatever, and he said, the interviewer was like, so you've made a lot on this and this over the past 2 years, and the guy says, yeah, well, anybody in technology over the past 2 years has made a killing. And they just said like he'd made $1 billion or something like that. Like, I was like, I've been in technology for 5 or 6 years. Heard during the dot-com boom. Like, I really just making a normal salary, So it did occur to me, and that was one of those things. Like, maybe I have stayed too long. I stayed there for 7 years, and that's the 92 to 99. And then, I think I was set for looking for an opportunity to do something. I didn't know enough, I think, to know how much fun a really small company, a really small startup was. So if I'd known that, I would have probably jumped a lot earlier.
Yes, okay, so that was kind of the incentive. Is you pull up beside the Ferrari, you hear this commercial, should have made $1 million the last few years. You're like, I got to find something new and maybe get in on some of this action.
Yeah, I think you start getting seeds planted in your mind about that.
Okay, so you started looking for something. What'd you find?
I wouldn't say I was looking that hard, but there was a company that a couple of my close friends at AdTran left and went to a startup called Discovery.com. So it was a local company that had been doing test equipment for telco type stuff, and so they were getting ready to make a startup out of it. They were they had a little founding team already. And they had some ideas about making stuff to test equipment for what's called DSLAM, so it's for DSL access multiplexers. And so once Brent Zitting was the main hardware, he was like my counterpart, and I was doing the software architecture for the group I was in at AdTran. So once Brent left, Brent's like, you need to come talk to us, and so I was definitely interested, and went and they were in a terrible rundown building and there were only 6 people there at the time, so it was really small. And I remember interviewing with the guy who was doing the software for them at the time, Curry Knight, who's one of the founders, and he said, so you'll work for peanuts and options, right? And I'm like, yep, you got the right person, so let's do this. So definitely pay cut to work there, and got what I thought was a good deal on getting some options. So young people negotiate, and because at that point you really have nothing to lose, you could just not get the job, I guess.
Yeah.
But there I wound up. So Curry really quickly said, I'm turning the software development of this over to you, and so we were able to hire lots of people and build some great stuff.
Okay, so you left the nice office overlooking the lake with the geese, and the first day for $1 million to go work at a place that was less than 10 people and was nowhere near $1 million.
Right, yeah, much. I mean, it could have gone sideways in a lot of different ways, and there were times during that course, and that's something you'll learn, right? Is where many of the people at the company didn't know that we had, only like 2 or 3 weeks of payroll left. We had to go figure out a way to get money to keep going. So it's like, man, I wish I was on the other side and didn't know this. They're all walking around, like not realizing what's happening here, but you have to keep that brave face of normalcy on, and but generally, that's just normal, like, right, that's what happens, and you find a way to make it work.
Okay, so what the people at AdTran say when you're like, hey, I'm going to leave this nice place and go work at a...
Yeah, I told you this story when we were talking before. One of the guys, and if you're here, you know him, but I'd laugh with him, and he would laugh with me about this too, but he so adamantly tried to talk me out of leaving. And he was like, it's the worst thing you could do. And he had researched what we were he knew a little bit about, because he knew the other guys who left. He knew a little bit about the product we were getting ready to go do. And so he was showing me this company. I think it may have been a Silicon Valley company. It was Turnstone was the name of the company. I can't believe I remember that. But they were already doing this. They were a startup, and they had a lot of VC money and stuff, and they were doing exactly the same product. He's like, Turnstone's going to win this, and you're gonna be out of a job, and all these things. He's so angry with me. And I'm like, you know what? I remember telling him, you may be right. You may be right. This may be completely the wrong place to go. But it's in a trajectory. I'll use Michael's word trajectory. It's the right trajectory. Like the vector is pointing in the right direction. This is the kind of thing I want to go do. So I'm going to go do this, you know. And the funny part of the story is, about a month after I started there, that same guy was calling me up, asking me, hey, do you guys hire anybody else? And I hired him. We ended up hiring him into the company. So yeah, that's a good story.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so while you're there, big things happen. Y'all ended up selling for $220 million
Something like that.
to Nokia. Now, what was that? I mean, that's got to be
So
pretty
that was
exciting.
obviously super awesome, exciting. Yeah, that was really neat. And for that, you know, like I didn't say a lot about Entrance IPO because that was kind of, you know, the finance people were taking care of all that. In this case, you know, Nokia came in and they do, when the mergers and acquisitions team of a big company comes in and they know what they're doing, they go through lots and lots of due diligence and rake you over the coals and really, you know, dig into what you're doing. And since, you know, I was the software architect of all this stuff, and it was a big software-based system, we spent a lot of time together with the Finns. You know, in fact, like they came in and said they wanted to see our roadmaps. Well, you know, we just barely got this product out there. So it's like, you know, like, let me see. The Finnish people talk kind of like Russians. You know, they don't use much air. So it's like, let me see your roadmaps. I'm like, no, you know, like, give me an hour and we on the whiteboard. Here's what we might go do next. You know, but I wasn't really sure what a roadmap should look like. Funny things like that. But it was an awesome experience. I still remember when we announced it to the whole team. Our colorful CEO, Marty Roberson, who's a sales, you know, true blue sales guy, you know, as a CEO, which is not a bad kind of CEO to have, stood up there and he had a coat and a dress shirt on, and he's like, we had an all hands meeting, and at some point during the meeting, he ripped his shirt, his coat off, and he had a Nokia t-shirt under that. And then these Nokia people came filing in from the back, and they handed, at that time, people didn't, like a lot of people didn't even have cell phones, or, you know, like, I don't know if I might have had a cell phone, but they were flip phones and stuff. Nokia was the bomb for flip phones. And they handed out flip phones to everybody that had like prepaid service and stuff. It was kind of cool, you know. So yeah, it was neat, and we had a good little ride with those guys.
Okay, all right, so you were there, that happened, and then soon after, you got the itch again, I'm gonna go do something else.
Right, so, well, you know, so we talked about the dot-com boom. Well, there was this dot-com bust, right? When a lot of companies, you know, folded or consolidated. Nokia had reached way too far. You know, we were in their what's called their broadband systems division. So they were doing it's the side of Nokia that does base stations, all the cellular base station antennas and the equipment that goes down at the bottom of those antennas. They build a lot of that stuff. So, but they had gone into an area that they wanted to pull back from. So they just, you know, somebody in Helsinki looked down a spreadsheet and said, yeah, that one needs to go, that one needs to go. So the Huntsville office was one of those. So we were going to be shut down.
So you're bought for $220 million,
and
2 years later,
they
just
shut us
about,
down.
it's gone.
Yeah. So, yeah, which was disappointing. You know, we knew that a lot of the stuff we'd worked on was just going to evaporate. You know, all this hard work that we put into it, a lot of late nights, you know. And if you're on the technical part of the team, a lot of those late nights, you're going to be by yourself. You know, you're there. I was there when we were on Century Drive off of Sparkman here in Huntsville till midnight, many nights in the early days, and all the founders and everybody were gone. You know, but we were going to make the same thing work. You know, so you know, you're going to do that. All the while thinking, this is going to be so awesome when people use this. It's going to be the best. Like, it's going to be able to diagnose all these, you know, problems with old telephone lines and things like that. You know, so you're thinking about how you're going to make it awesome. So it is sad. No matter if you had any control over it or if you've made money with it, you know, it is sad when all the work goes up in smoke, and it kind of did. But so it wasn't my choice to go, I'm going to leave here and go do something else. I got the itch to do a startup again. It probably would have happened at some point because Nokia was an awfully big company. It was a neat experience because I got to manage, like we were doing a bunch of Java stuff. So I had Java teams in Petaluma, California, I had one in Helsinki, and I had guys in Huntsville. So it was like managing distributed teams, traveling to, you know, Northern California and Finland a lot, you know. So there's some perks to doing that. But yeah, when they shut it down, interesting, you could tell lots of stories about that. Like, you know, some TV shows where they come in, the Bobs come in and say, we're gonna make this the best layoffs ever. You know, we're gonna make this layoff experience, and it's, you know, really great. And so when I saw this kind of the scenes in movies, I'm like, yeah, I remember that happening. That does happen. You're going to lose your job in a very, very awesome way, and we're going to make it really wonderful for you. But yeah, they had you could sort of opt out. So there were bands of people to opt out, and And so myself and a couple of the other guys there, one of whom was the guy who tried to talk me out of leaving Adtran. So he was thanking me by this time, but he and another guy and I started another company. So we left in one of the early tranches and started another company.
All right, now this next company, while not the biggest success at the end, you think you might have learned more during this time than any other company that you've been a part of?
It was, I wouldn't say I learned more, but it was so. But those painful lessons are good. You really remember them, and so it was called Terra Cruz. We were building what were they at that time called appliances, purpose-built appliances, but it was really just a PC. It's like an quad AMD Opteron processor on a board inside of a 1U rack box that sat on the network. We used all of our mad networking skills from both Adtran and DiscoveryCom days to intercept database queries. So when an application would ask a SQL query over the network to a big iron database back there, we had tons and tons of memory. We would cache queries. We would respond. We'd speed stuff up. So we looked at all the applications that were out there, all these business enterprise applications. This is kind of pre-cloud days, guys. So a lot of them were in local data centers of companies, and they were slow. They were like PeopleSoft and SAP and all this stuff. There's lots of issues with them being slow. So we were trying to make that better. The lessons were lessons that you can now read in like the lean startup and stuff like that. You need to and disciplined entrepreneurship where you need to go out and touch your customers. You need to count what they call count noses. People are really bad about doing what's called top-down, market analysis. And top-down is good, but you also have to do bottom-up, right? You have to go and find who am I going to sell this to, and you need to talk to hundreds of those people and understand and find out who is going to buy this, right? So there's the people that are going to use it, and there's the buyers, and there's the process of buying. And so all those lessons, we didn't really know, and we learned the hard way. We built something that had a lot stacked against it when you went out to try to sell it. So we, I guess it was not a terrible experience because we wound up selling the company, but it was, it was a fire sale. I lost money on it. The employees did okay. They kept their jobs, and we had another company from Austin, Texas called Crossroads Systems that was running that company for another couple of years. But it was right at the end of that, right after we'd sold it to Crossroads, and I'd started having to travel back and forth to Austin to meet with their team, who I think were just crazy. They were kind of crazy to buy us, but I'm a pretty good sales guy, so I thought it was good. I needed to leave. And about that time, Danny Wyndham, who is at Digium now, I guess still, and was then at Adtran, called me up and asked he heard that we sold and asked if I'd come back to Adtran for a spell.
Yeah, okay, so we've only got like 5 minutes before we go into
That's
Q&A.
easy, we're almost done.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so you're at Adtran, you realize this is a totally different company than when you had left 6 years before that. You had left in 99, I think.
Yeah, right, that was crazy. Yeah, 6 years had passed. But it seemed like a lot longer than 6 years, So I came into Adtran, and the weirdest thing was, I actually came back into sitting on the floor in an office not far from where I'd sat 6 years ago, and people were still doing the same things they had done 6 years ago. It's the same people, and some of the little kind of cliques that would go to lunch together were still doing that, and so it felt like a weird kind of time machine that I'd gone through, And I kept having this creepy feeling, like a chill almost, when I'd see stuff. And I knew a lot of people, but I also knew where they were supposed to be. I'm like, you're supposed to be in that office over there. Why are you over here? Like they had moved once in that last time period or whatever. So just strange, But it was a different company. It was different. It was bigger, but I think I'd also gotten hooked on small companies. The really, really great. Okay, I did not go there intending to leave 2 years later. I started consulting on the side and consulted with a couple of really interesting companies around town, startups. IBEC was one that's not there anymore. It's a broadband over power line company, which was where Brent Zitting was working at the time, the guy one of the guys who pulled me over to DiscoveryCom. And I consulted for Southern Vision Systems, SVSI, which has been acquired now by Harman, I guess. So that was neat. And then I also consulted with this little company called Synapse Wireless. And they were really interesting. Wade Patterson was the founder. He was running it when I first started working with him as kind of like a little small business. He had contracts. I mean, he was working for this company Centralite in Mobile. I think they're Israeli located, doing a contract project, and they were kind of calling the shots. It's kind of the first time I'd seen that sort of business run, and I thought it's interesting, but it's not a startup. You're not like putting it out there, raising a bunch of money, and swinging for the fences here. I did tell Wade once, I said, if you ever want to make a startup out of this, give me a call, And so about a year later, he gave me a call.
Yeah. Okay, so how many people are at Synapse, and then how long did you stay there? What all happened while you were there?
So yeah, we get really fast now. So this would have been 2007, I started. I think there were 6 people, and they had 2 engineers. They had, which they really didn't have a software person. They had two hardware folks, and so we at the time we were building little radio modules, and which now it's called the Internet of Things, right? Make little wireless modules inside of everything. So we started we started hiring folks and building a technology. One thing that I'll also tell folks is, this has happened recurred through my career. If you're working on something that you love at home, like in your spare time, probably it's going to be something you'll use at work, and it's going to be awesome. So I had been working on doing a lot of Python programming. Python was not something I'd use. I actually used it on that second stint at AdTran a little bit, but prior to that, I learned it because I was trying to teach a 10-year-old kid, my nephew, to code. And I was like, what's a good language for doing that these days? When I was a kid, it was BASIC, so that can't be the answer now. So it's Python. So it turned out I kind of fell in love with Python. It's a great language. You can get a lot done with it. So in 2007, I helped do some great stuff for that technology, but I realized and I built a whole, their whole user interface and everything they used to control it with Python. They actually tried to talk me out of that. They said, could you just use C++? That's what we're more accustomed to seeing. I'm like, no, I think Python's the right choice on this. So, and I did, and it was great. But we wound up, when I would demo, with this Python-based user interface, I would demo this thing to people, they would go, oh, wow, you changed some Python up here, and the device does something different, so you must be programming the device in Python. It's got Python loaded on the device. I'm like, oh, no. It's actually, the device is just sending like AT commands over the air, and the Python is all running on the PC over here. But that got me to thinking. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we could run Python on the embedded device? This is really tiny. It's only got 4K of memory for our first platform. And I knew from my days, I told you we used TRS-80s and Apple IIs. Apple II had a 6502 8-bit processor, was running at 1 megahertz, had maybe 16K of RAM or something like that, not a lot of RAM, and 128K of flash, maybe, I can't remember. But, or not flash, but ROM. But I mean, you could fit BASIC in 8K of ROM. I knew that. So I was like, okay, I've got a tiny little system on chip that costs $1. It's got 4K of RAM, but it's got 64K of flash of ROM on it. I could for sure run BASIC on there. I'm pretty sure I could make a Python that will run on that. It'd be lots better than BASIC, and it'll work really well. So secretly, I had one of the guys that was doing software there. I had recommended him when I was consulting, and I didn't want, Rick, God rest his soul. He had done a lot of the early work on the protocols in this product that was there, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings by saying, I'm gonna throw this all away. You can't do that, right? So I secretly, without telling anybody, developed a little Python VM to go in this, and then until I proved out that it would work. That was like in the basement, I was doing that. So, and then when I unveiled it to Rick, by that time Kevin, we'd hired Kevin, a couple of really great other engineers. They were like, holy cow, this is the way to do it. So we ended up building up this thing with embedded Python. It was I think it's the first commercial embedded Python product ever, Python on microcontrollers. And now the product that we're using for educators is based on MicroPython, which is a whole different thing. It won't run in 4K of RAM. You really need more like 64K of RAM, but it's cool. And it was neat. And that company, so I know we're out of time, but that company grew. We hired a lot of people. One nice thing about my second stint at AdTran, and I'm sorry AdTran, but I will say this: Danny left. And Everett Ramage, who also is one of the guys who lured me over there, who I love a lot, left and retired. And so then the Synapse opportunity happened. And I went, right? Wasn't intending to stay that short of a time. That's not a good idea. But, well, it is in Silicon Valley, but in Huntsville it's nice. Generally thought well of. But then people started knocking on the door, you know, and people from Adtran, and a lot of young guys. One of them's right there, not that young anymore, but anyway, Jonathan, that I'd met during my second tour at Adtran in 2005 to 2007. I met this fabulous set of people, and those people became the core of the engineering team at Synapse, and several of them now are with me at Firia. So, you know, those people that have been, so these are people I've been working with now for, you know, 15 years or so. It's really, really wonderful. I'm blessed to be able to do that. But that's kind of what we grew, and so to cut the story a little bit shorter, by 2012 we did end up selling. We sold the company to McQuain, famous for the McQuain Science Center in Birmingham, famous to us normal mortal folk. But McQuain's a company that's a global industrial, you know, heavy industry company. So one of the reasons why they're kind of quiet is they have near monopoly on you know, ductile iron pipe, the stuff that water flows through. So you kind of need it, and there's a demand for more of it. They've gone, so the FTC won't let them grow anymore in the U.S. And they've got, so they're global now, and they're branching into other things, among which are technology companies like us, or Synapse.
Cool. All right, and so then that led up to, you know, at Firia, we've talked about that. Okay, so there's a few other snippets that I thought were really interesting today. You got like 10 words to respond to, kind of thing, and then we'll go.
Lightning round.
Yes, lightning round.
Is
Yeah,
just
to these,
man or nation.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got kids. How did you manage balancing life and kids and wife?
So balance, work-life balance. It's difficult, but I don't know. I mean, there were those late nights. That's true, but so I don't have an easy answer for that. I tried to be there as much as I could, and you know, and still do for the kids. You know, and so that takes a lot of work. You know, when you graduate from college and you start seeing the adult people do things, you're like, there's some guys who use work as a way to not be around the kids, because it's hard. Like, babies are hard, you know, and like, you can't even go to the bathroom. If you're at home, you can't go to the bathroom without having kids in there, right? At work, it's easy, especially if you're a technology person. You're an information worker, right? You get to go to the bathroom and it's all good. You can just sit there if you want. Now you can play on your phone, right? So it's hard. So I'd see people working late hours because they didn't want to go home and help with the kids. I did not do that. So that, you know, that's something that I will say there, but you know, I'm not perfect, and it's really difficult. You know, work-life balance is a difficult thing for sure.
You talked to a manager told you this, and he told you to speak up in meetings because you pretty much had nothing to fear, and you ended up thinking about that for a startup. So, you know, what's your thoughts on failure? You know, you try to start a company and you fail.
Right. That was either Norm Harris at Adtran or Tommy Killian, one of those who were early on guys at Adtran, really older gentlemen that I really respect, both of them. One of them told me when I was a young guy coming into Adtran, he said, yeah, you know, he liked what I'd said. And he says, yeah, that's good. You need to speak up. And just, I was bold, I guess, about, you know, and risk pissing people off. And he said, that's good. You need to keep doing that. You know, you guys are, the market is hot. You know, you could get a job anywhere. So what are they going to do? You know, if they fire you, the next job's usually better anyway. So I've always kind of kept that in mind. And it's, you know, it's a way to, you know, remind yourself that you don't get too invested in where you are.
Yeah. All right. You are more engineering focused for sure. Tell me, you talked about how days you have a lot of meetings, you feel like you've completely not gotten anything done that day.
Right. So Geri, my business partner and wife, will laugh about this one because a lot of times I'll be frustrated because I'll say I've gotten nothing done today, and she'll remind me like, look, you did this, you called these people, you met with these people, you did, you know, there's a lot of stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's like I wasted the entire day, and I feel like if I hadn't built something into the product or made something, you know, technical substantially better today, if I've written my share of code, you know, or designed some hardware, it wasn't a good day. And I constantly have to remind myself, and well, she helps remind me too, that's not the case. So, you know, you could say like, well, there is a limit to like meetings and things like that where they're not productive after a certain point in time, and you should be impatient with stuff like that. But you shouldn't beat yourself up because you didn't get anything done, because those are important things to do as well.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well that's pretty much all I've got. Do we have any questions?
All right,
What you got?
I'm gonna come up with more fortune cookies.
Michael.
I can go first.
Geri.
What kind of code are you teaching with CodeSpace from Firia Labs?
So the question is, what kind of code are we teaching? What language? Well, it's Python language, so we do think that's a great first language. It's an awesome thing to think about. If you know kids who are learning the code, like, man, one of the most popular languages out there as a professional that you can make really good money writing happens to also coincidentally be a great starting language. How weird is that? You know, I mean, you would think in any other job or whatever, if you're like, yeah, this is the beginner thing we're going to start you on, but in order to really, you know, if you're going to get out there and really make money at it, it's going to be completely different than that. This is like the dumbed down baby version of stuff that you're going to eventually use. It's not the case. So it's really neat that we can teach 5th graders this language, and I can go, you know, that code you're writing right there, you can make 6 figures writing code like that. You know, so it's cool, and it plays really well to the middle schoolers and things like that I was telling you, where they want a real world connection. You can tell them a career connection too. Or, you know, if you want to go wrestle with some big data or something, you know, Python's a great language to do that. If you want to do scientific computing, like the, what's it called, Jupyter Notebooks that we're going to, talk about. So, cool stuff. Yeah, and so that's the language we're using. Thanks for the question. Yes?
What's the last book you read?
The last book I read, I just recently picked up, and I kind of am ashamed to say this, it's Extreme Ownership. I saw it on the shelf and I had to pick it up because SEAL Team Bruiser and I in Ramadi in 2003, we were leaving the LZ, and but it's management tips from Navy SEALs, so it's like a guilty pleasure. It's awesome. I don't know if I recommend it as a business book, but anyway, that's the last one I read.
And the book you talked about a lot whenever we were meeting was the Lean Startup and how.
Yeah, Lean Startup made a big impact on me because as I read it, I'm like, oh my gosh, we did that, Or, even before that, like big upfront design, where we worked at TerraCruise for a year before we put something in the market. And we had a lot of fun doing it. A room full of engineers, we're just writing code, man. And we had specs that we'd come up with, and it was going to do all this stuff, and it did, and we made it. We're really good at it, and it did what we thought it was going to do. And then we actually launched it out in the world. We hired some salespeople, and we had them carry it out there. And they're like, yeah, nobody wants to buy this because they have DBAs, and the people we'd be selling it to are heavily invested in not buying this. This kind of eradicates their value proposition. So who are you going to sell it to? So it's these great lessons, like when you read it and go, ah, crap, that was 3 years of my life. That I just in a paragraph, I could have read this if this had been around. So read that stuff. There are some really good lessons in that. And I talked about the Feynman quote. There's also what they call the Stockdale paradox. Have you heard of that? I think it's William Stockdale. He was a prisoner of war, Admiral Stockdale. The Stockdale paradox is I can't remember what it was. It's kind of like the Feynman thing, but look it up. But it's basically never lose hope. Stay faithful that you are going to win. Stay faithful that you're going to win no matter what. And at the same time, simultaneously, face the most brutal facts about your reality, the bitter truths about what you're doing. So this is like you're the person that's easiest to fool, right? Because Admiral Stockdale said that the people that in an interview that the people that died in the prisoner of war camp were the optimists, which seems weird. I'm an optimist, he said this because they kept getting their hearts broken, like they was, we're gonna be out by December. December would roll around, no. We're gonna be out by Easter. Easter would roll around, no. But he's like, we're probably here for, it could be 10 years, I don't know, it doesn't matter. We're gonna face it, but we are going to get home. This is gonna make us better, this whole experience. That was his philosophy. And I think in a business, you kind of have to be that way, right? If you don't face those hard realities, like, this is not working, or it's so easy to fool yourself, right?
Yeah.
So don't fool yourself is the biggest thing. Question and challenge yourself constantly.
Yeah, all right, cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, I keep making up answers. If y'all don't have questions, I'm making answers. I told Megan I made the whole thing up. So it's a good story. Now, are we ready to do the real interview now? That was a good warm-up.
That was good. I think we are right at an hour, Mike, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so we're
Okay.
right at an hour. Well, David, thank you for coming out
Yeah,
and doing
thanks,
this. It was a
Cole.
whole lot of fun.
Anytime.